Ukraine is ready to participate and teach globally how to make a difference with the procurement. Because it's now 100% in Ukraine. And I think that the biggest recognition is the International Prize for Procurement that Ukraine received, where Max Nikodov, Alexander Starodovtsov received in London, for recognizing the efforts of Ukrainian team of engineers, commercial platforms, people, politicians, everybody to make a big difference after the revolution of dignity. And today, this is a numbers problem. Yesterday, it's 116,000 tenders, 38 billion hryvnias traded, 1.7 billion savings, and state budget spending, zero. This is very important. It's been built by a crowd. It's been built by Ukrainian people, by active people who wanted to make a difference. Prozora is a story of success. Prozora is a story of openness. That's how everybody can go and check what's going on in the system. Nobody in the world today, besides Ukraine, can do that way, where online everybody can see what's done. And I want to thank you, everyone who helped. I want to thank you, international donors. I want to thank you, teams, IT folks. I'm an engineer in my heart and my background, so I want to thank all engineers who did an amazing work. I want to thank Max. I want to say a special big thank you to Alex Starodovtsov, whose passion and energy for that reform being an important milestone to change the country. And that's great, and I'm pretty sure that the GPA would be using Prozora to use in the global system where we have a code available, and I hope that you will be happy to use it as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. To put this in the context of the meeting international standards, let me now invite Rob Addison, who was chairing the efforts of the negotiation process for the WTO GPA Secretariat and has been looking together with Jean-Yves Mull from the EU delegation on the negotiation process of Ukraine, which has been successfully completed in September 2015 and officially coming into force a month ago. I'm truly sorry we couldn't meet a month ago to exactly celebrate the legal opening of the doors to the GPA, but we're trying to do it. Rob, please.
Thank you so much, Elisa. Mr. Shimkiv, Mr. Maxim Nevikov, Alexander, Jean-Yves Mull, other distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, I'm here on behalf of Mr. Roberto Azevedo, the Director General of the World Trade Organization, first and foremost to congratulate Ukraine for its magnificent achievement in joining the WTO Agreement on Government Procurement, and also very much to help in scoping the way forward from here, because of course this is a beginning and not an end, and to show our support, the World Trade Organization's support for Ukraine in carrying forward the effective implementation of this agreement. We, all of us here in this room, are aware of the importance of government procurement. This is not simply an opportunity for our businesses to engage in profitable business activity, though it certainly is that, but it is also at the center of efforts to provide adequate infrastructure for the growth of our economies and the future of our societies, to provide essential goods and services for the well-being of our citizens, be it in the field of public health, essential infrastructure, education, all of the activities that governments do to promote the welfare of their citizens in turn depend on efficient and effective and transparent and corruption-free government procurement. And the the World Trade Organization's agreement on government procurement really is the world's principal legal instrument for promoting free trade, the efficient operation of markets, also very much transparency and good governance in the government procurement sector. And therefore, it really is a very impressive and important step that Ukraine has taken in joining this agreement. And frankly, in coming into this agreement in advance of some other countries in this region. And we want to congratulate Ukraine for that. I do want to say, and many of you here will know, the Secretariat of the World Trade Organization, which is really the organization that I work for, is a kind of skeleton organization. We depend for the results achieved on the work, the essential work of our friends. And in this case, it really, in my view, has been a tremendous group effort, a team effort, involving certainly our friends at EBRD, also Sigma, also many other international donors, very much the support, the critical support of the European Union and the Commission. I don't think we would be here celebrating this without them. So it's even though it's the WTO agreement that you've joined, it's really an outcome of the joint work of all of these organizations, and of course, first and foremost, yourselves, the government of Ukraine. And we really, we salute Ukraine for this, and we thank all of our friends for this very warmly. Well, this is what I wanted to say by way of opening remarks. We'll have much more to say about the way forward. Thank you, Elisa. Thank you, friends. It's great to be here again in this room where we've had some important meetings already, and I look forward to discussion today.
Thank you so much, Robert. And now I'm using the opportunity to ask another coordinator again in Geneva, Jean-Yves Mille, and a bit of history here. When he came up with the idea that Ukraine should be more active on the GPA, well, it was 2011. And at that time, except for, I'm trying to find Mr. Kryuchkov, who disappeared me, no one believed it makes sense. And we were talking to the GPA parties, to EU, to US, to Canadians. Do you think it makes sense? And they said, for us, yes, of course. So let's start. And it was 2011. We didn't know that it's going to take us a couple of years and a revolution to make it. But if not for the encouragement from the EU representative at the WTO, most probably we wouldn't try. Jean-Yves, the floor to you.
Thank you very much, Elisa. It's a real pleasure for the European Commission to participate in this event and to celebrate, I would say, the recent accession of Ukraine to the Government Procurement Agreement. As Robert Anderson said, this has been a team effort. I mean, a team of all the GPA parties who have been talking, encouraging, negotiating with the Ukraine delegation in Geneva to try to get the best result possible for the accession of Ukraine in the GPA. You have mentioned that the EU has been a partner and has been heavily involved in this process for quite some time. Indeed, I think we can say that the European Union is a sort of privileged partner for the reform of the public procurement system in Ukraine through different means, not only by helping them joining the government procurement agreement in the WTO, we also offer a lot of assistance to Ukraine to align its legislation with the EU directives, which should be achieved in a couple of years' time through the project. We have a dedicated project providing technical assistance. We also offer assistance via the OECD and Sigma. We have also been engaging with Ukraine on what we call a regulatory dialogue, where we meet our Ukrainian colleagues, to exchange information about latest developments, not only legislative developments, but also best practices in our respective countries, to try to stimulate a debate, because what we see in Ukraine today could be quite relevant for the EU at a later stage, and what is happening in the EU could also be considered as future reforms in Ukraine. And as Mr. Shinkov said, we all share the same objectives, and we all have to go through the same reforms. We have a number of common priorities: professionalization, centralization, development of an efficient e-prop system. These are challenges that we will all have to meet sooner or later. And the regulatory dialogue, the regular regulatory dialogue that we have with Ukrainians, but also with a series of other third countries, is particularly helpful in this respect. A word maybe on the internationalization aspect of public procurement, because we have talked a lot about, or you have heard a lot about domestic reforms. But I think opening up this procurement market to international competition is also a major driver for domestic structural reform. If you want to compete on a global basis, you need to have an efficient system domestically. And I hope that acceding to the GPA, I hope that the association agreement between the EU and Ukraine and the deep and comprehensive free trade agreement, which will hopefully soon enter into force, will also contribute to the domestic reforms which are necessary. We in the EU are also engaged into a series of domestic reforms, and I think we will have a lot to exchange in the future. So thank you very much to the EBRD for organizing this seminar. I will have the opportunity to talk to you later about the reform that we are envisaging in the EU and which we would be happy to discuss with Ukrainians, and I wish you a good conference, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jean-Yves. And last but not least, the EBRD Regional Office Director, Shakir Guner. As you know, EBRD is working mainly with the private sector, and I'm working in the policy reforms. So every time we are trying to come up with any technical cooperation project, I'm coming to this gentleman and I'm telling him, you know, these guys, they have a great idea. They want to change something, and we need to help. And this is how it works. So Chef is here today to join us in celebrating something we have achieved. Chef.
Thank you, Eliza. I'm really delighted, proud, happy to be here to celebrate the WTO GPA accession for Ukraine, but also with you to further explore what else needs to be done to implement it in the sense that it is intended. They say, you know, success has many fathers. In this case, I think this success has many fathers and mothers. So I want to thank also those parents who committed and carried this for more than an elephant's period of pregnancy. You said, Dimitri, that it's over 2 years, so it exceeds the longest sort of delivery period in nature, but the outcome is beautiful. I just want to say simply that this is, for me and for everybody, I believe, is a great example of the commitment, the delivery on the commitment of post-Maidan governments for enhanced transparency, enhanced governance, a level playing competitive field for everybody, about effectiveness, efficiency, and thus about fight against corruption. Because we know that this was the public procurement area was one of the worst corners, if you like, of corruption in the past. That the monies were wasted, your money, the people of Ukraine's money was being diverted to other purposes than it's intended. So this, to me, is about that, and it's also about showing how Ukraine is willing to harmonize with the EU and international community standards in important matters. Public procurement is also related to attracting investors into the country, because when the foreign investors see that this is a competitive, open, transparent country where the rule of law governs, then they will also come not just for bidding for tenders, for contracts, but also they come to invest in the country. So in that sense, for me, it is also very important. The WTO GPA parties represent many different jurisdictions and approaches to public procurement. Therefore, it is indeed a success to have one single fundamentals architectural infrastructure document, framework, so that everybody can negotiate and bid and win on a common, shared, transparent basis. In the context of integration into the global economy, I also think that this is a great success, and it will bring Ukraine the possibility to really shape also and participate in the shaping of the future approaches to public procurement within the WTO GPA, and to negotiate procurement market coverage with countries still in the accession process. But this is not really the end of the road, as you said, Eliza, many times to me, that this needs to be adequately implemented, requiring further and ongoing efforts to development of public procurement legislation and institutional setup. And it is indeed in that context that we are particularly happy and value the Prozoro infrastructure, that I think is something that Ukraine is going to be proud of for many years to come, because it is, as you said, a globally open product, if I may call it that way, that I'm sure many countries will want to take advantage of in the future, and there are already some countries signing up to it, such as Moldova, I understand, and this is a great news, and I want to encourage our colleagues in Moldova to pursue that. It should also be emphasized that this agreement, this accession, will open, as Dimitri said, the opportunity for Ukrainian businesses to bid for contracts in this 1.7 trillion market. The numbers man is Dimitro here. He knows exactly how much the market is. It's an incredible market. And even if you look at a slice, tiny slice of that, less than 1/10 of 1%, it's a huge amount of money for Ukrainian business to take advantage of. So I want to celebrate this together with you. I want to congratulate everybody in the bringing this to this level of conclusion, if you like, at the first stage of this process. And I wish it the best of success. I need to go out because I have only today in Ukraine, and I have many commitments. So my departure is not because I don't think this is important. On the contrary, I wanted to make sure I was here so that I adjusted everything else around it. But I still have to go to some other meetings. But I wish you a very fruitful and productive working day. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Well, this is what you got. It was the banker talking. Well, so let us now move to the first session. We have called it Achievements and Challenges, because this is, I believe, where Ukraine is at the moment. You have a lot to be proud of. The reform is now almost in the completion of the first stage. I'm saying almost because, honestly, I'm still waiting for this 1st of August, when the entire country will be covered by the new legislation, by the new processes, by the new monitoring, and by the new reporting. This is something which we really are looking forward to. So let me now invite Rob Anderson to tell us a bit more how the GPA is shaping the policy and how the GPA is giving the opportunities to business on the international level. Rob, please.
The presentation.
So thank you, Elisa. Ladies and gentlemen, we now turn to, I suppose, a less formal presentation. And I would invite, I will walk you through a few slides. But the theme here is, in a way, I want to show everyone and remind everyone of the big picture of why we have an agreement on government procurement in the World Trade Organization and in the world, and of the significance of joining the agreement for Ukraine, and also a little bit about the way forward, not only for Ukraine, but actually, and I will emphasize this point, Ukraine right now is a full-fledged party to this agreement. So actually Ukraine shares with the other parties the responsibility for determining future directions for the agreement itself and for the work of the Committee on Government Procurement. So this presentation is to remind us of these things. I'm calling it the Revised GPA, an emerging pillar of global trade, good governance, and prosperity, because I really do think that this area of government procurement, which at the beginning of the time of the World Trade Organization was a relatively modest part of the overall WTO system, actually now is in the process of becoming a major pillar of the WTO system and of future global prosperity, I would say. Okay? So, first thing I want to talk about then is Ukraine's achievement in joining the GPA. And as I said, even in my opening comment, the GPA, that is the Government Procurement Agreement of the World Trade Organization, is the world's primary instrument for promoting international trade in relation to government procurement markets. And as a result, and as has been said by other speakers, it also has a very significant role in guiding domestic policy reforms, in strengthening the transparency of our procurement markets. And for these reasons as well, it functions as a signal of each participating country's commitment to good governance. I think it's not too much to say, and this is really to the credit of the parties, the European Union and the other parties to the agreement, that the GPA is in the process of becoming a kind of a gold standard of accountability and transparency and commitment to good governance in the procurement sector. So as a result of this, then, we can say that Ukraine, in joining the agreement, first of all, has given its own suppliers access to global markets, which have been valued, as was said, at up to $1.7 trillion annually. And indeed, I like very much the way our counterpart, the representative of EBRD, said, it's not necessary to think of Ukrainian suppliers gaining a quarter or a half of this market. Even by winning contracts that are valued at 1% of this global market will be a huge increment and a very profitable opportunity for Ukrainian suppliers. And we want Ukrainian suppliers to not only have that opportunity, which you now have legally, but also actually to be able to capitalize on that opportunity. Okay? So you've also made a commitment to strengthening transparency and good governance in the procurement sector. This is an ongoing process for all participating economies. It's not something that we do once and then it's done and we move on to other things. Indeed, ensuring integrity and transparency and accountability in our procurement systems is an ongoing process that all of our parties work on continuously. And this is the way we should think of the challenges in this area. And indeed, as I said, as a full-fledged party to the GPA, Ukraine itself will have an important opportunity to help determine the terms of accession of other countries that will be now coming into the agreement, and also the future evolution of the agreement itself. The GPA does not stand still. One of the strengths, one of the really important strengths of the agreement is that it is a dynamic instrument, and in each version of the agreement there is incorporated a commitment to ongoing review and eventually further negotiations to strengthen the agreement, to deepen the market access commitments, and to ensure that the continuing relevance of the agreement. And really, I would like to invite and encourage Ukraine to feel that you will have, an important opportunity and responsibility to contribute to this process. And incidentally, the next review of the agreement on government procurement, all of us are now speaking very proudly of the revised agreement on government procurement, which was formally adopted in the year 2012 and has now come into force, and this is the agreement which Ukraine has joined. But actually, beginning as soon as next year, there will be a further review of the agreement, and you should be truly looking forward to contributing to this review process, because we want the GPA to continue to evolve and to be, as useful as it possibly can be to the parties to the agreement, which is you and the others. Okay? So I want to just remind everyone a little bit about what I call the changing global context of the agreement. This is an agreement whose membership is growing continuously over time. We see, as I've listed here, actually 46 WTO members are covered by this agreement. This, of course, includes the European Union and its 28 member states that in practice function as a collective single party. Nonetheless, they are also individual members of the WTO, and they form a very significant component of the membership of the WTO. When you see the list, I'm not going to read out everything. Ukraine itself is now the most recent party to the agreement. I believe there are representatives here, also in this room, of Moldova, the Republic of Moldova, and I'm very pleased to say and publicly announce that the instrument of accession of Moldova was received in Geneva 2 days ago. This means that Moldova will follow Ukraine in becoming legally bound by the agreement 30 days from the date of the deposit of its instrument of accession. So even this number of 46 is soon going to be 47 before we know about it. And there are several other countries in this region and beyond that are in the process of negotiating accession to the agreement. Again, I'm not going to read them all out, but at least we would want you all to be conscious, that Albania, Georgia, Kyrgyz Republic, Tajikistan, in this kind of surrounding broad global area, are actively pursuing their accessions to the agreement. And Ukraine actually, in a way now, can be a model for those other countries. It's amazing how quickly this transition happens. 6 months ago, actually slightly more than 6 months ago, you were still in the process of doing the final negotiations. I remember when Mr. Maxim Nedvikov came to Geneva for the last substantive meeting to conclude the work on Ukraine's accession. It was an exciting time for everyone. But you are no longer, the party that is negotiating its way in. You are in, and you actually have a right and a responsibility to, respond to interest from other countries in the region that are wanting to come into the agreement, to help guide them in the way, and also the right to negotiate with them and ensure that their terms of accession are also, that are viewed by you as being reasonable and a good contribution to the future of the agreement as well. beyond the 8 WTO members that are the 8 other WTO members that are currently in the accession process, we have these other WTO members who have taken commitments to seek accession to the agreement, including, Kazakhstan, Macedonia, Mongolia, the Russian Federation, and so forth. So all of these things will be coming out. The GPA is never going to be standing still. We should, all of us, think of it as a kind of continuing project that gets larger and deeper and better and more cohesive over time. And we count on, we invite, and we also count on the contribution of Ukraine to this process. Okay? I'm going to just, don't want to take too much time here, so I'm going to go a little more quickly over some of these slides. But these are other factors that are increasing the importance of this agreement. So the first factor is the growing membership of the agreement, but a very important other factor is the heightened infrastructure needs of both developing and developed economies and transition economies. And this in itself is making government procurement more important, more strategically important to the future of our economies. And we will, in the process, all of the projections that are done by engineering associations and so forth indicate that the world's the infrastructure investment needs, not only in this region, but also very much, for example, in the United States, in Canada, in China. All of our infrastructure renewal needs are going to be gigantic, and the GPA will play an essential role in ensuring that those needs are met, and also are met in ways that are transparent and efficient and free of corruption. Okay? And indeed, part of the reason why we're here, and I think as I listen to the story of why Ukraine took this step, it's also because of a heightened consciousness of the importance of good governance and the global struggle against corruption for future prosperity and development. And this is something that I think all of us who work internationally are now aware of. And this is an important change that has taken place in the last 10 to 15 years. I would say much greater awareness of the importance of integrity and good governance for development and future prosperity. And that's also partly, I think, why you joined, and is an important reason for the existence of the GPA. I remind everyone in this slide that the GPA is actually, it's not something that exists in isolation. It in fact is, very well synergized and harmonized with other international instruments in this area. And, I would say first and foremost, in this location, it's the European Union directives, which are the international instrument, which are, a key point of reference. And there's obviously, given the importance of the European Union within the GPA, there's an important synergy between the GPA and the EU directives themselves. But be aware also, please, that there are synergies and complementarities between the GPA and the UNCITRAL model law on procurement, also on things like the World Bank's new procurement framework. This was quite a major breakthrough for the international community, I would say. The World Bank's procurement framework, which previously ignored the GPA, now refers specifically to the GPA and refers specifically to GPA accession as one tool through which World Bank client countries can equip themselves with procurement legislation, which will also meet the standards of the World Bank. I'm very excited about this, by the way. I think this is quite a significant step forward in terms of harmonization and synergy between the different international instruments in this area. Okay, just to go very quickly, the core principles of this agreement, there are 3 in number. These are non-discrimination, transparency, and procedural fairness for suppliers and potential suppliers. And really, all of you have access to the text of the agreement, and this is available on the WTO website at all times to anyone. It's publicly there, not in any sense restricted. But when you go through the provisions of the agreement, whether it's the provisions, the notice provisions, whether it's the provisions regarding registration of suppliers, the provisions regarding the treatment of technical specifications, tender awards, qualification of suppliers, all of these things, they really, in a way, are manifestations of these three core principles: non-discrimination, transparency, and procedural fairness. And if we let those three principles be our kind of guiding light in the future evolution, of course, we have to check, and we should, and I urge you to do that, to check carefully, the correspondence between the GPA's requirements for notice procedures and so forth, and your own domestic legislation. But this, to a large extent, has already been done. And, the point is that your legislation now is embodying these core principles, which are also the same principles of the GPA, and they are actually the principles that are animating procurement reforms globally now. So it's all about non-discrimination in covered procurement markets, also transparency, which includes not only the systematic advertising of procurement opportunities, but also transparency, for example, post-award, sharing necessary information with suppliers that did not get the contract, so that they will both have confidence in the procedures that were followed, and also, be able to help themselves and better equip themselves to bid successfully on future procurements. All of these principles, these three principles, actually work in harmony and synergy with each other, and they are, the beating heart of the GPA, I would say. Okay, the GPA, of course, and we know this, also counts heavily on the importance of what we call domestic review procedures, and I hope that going forward, the continued nurturing of domestic review, this is complaint procedures, ensuring that these function well, effectively, transparently. These are important keys to the implementation of the agreement as well. Okay, the revised GPA, several of the speakers this morning referred to this. Of course, this is the agreement that was concluded in 2012, came into force in 2014. This includes the modernized text of the agreement. It includes what we call the Market Access Enhancement Package, whereby the parties collectively broadened and deepened their market access commitments, adding $80 to $100 billion annually to the value of the agreement. And there's also something called the new work programs of the Committee on Government Procurement, and I will come back to that in a closing slide, because this is actually another area where Ukraine itself can contribute, and we hope you will. Okay? So the revised agreement is now in force for all of the parties except for one. The one is Switzerland, and for your assurance, the fact that Switzerland has not yet ratified the revised GPA does not indicate any kind of lack of confidence or something like this. What it means is that Switzerland is having to adapt its internal procurement laws and regulations and institutions to properly reflect the requirements of the revised GPA. And Switzerland is eager to do that and is coming to the conclusion of that renewal process. Okay? And at that stage, when Switzerland finally submits its instrument of acceptance, as we call it, that means at that stage, the revised GPA will be everything, and the old 1994 GPA will become a historical footnote. Okay? It's very much the revised GPA that Ukraine is a party of now. Well, what happened in the text of the revised GPA? You know, the core principles are the same as before: non-discrimination, transparency, procedural fairness. But what was done in the revision to the text I'm speaking of now is the following, and that is that the whole agreement was rewritten to make it easier to understand, easier to implement, easier to follow. It was properly updated to reflect the use of e-procurement tools, and I'm very conscious that here in Kiev you're working hard on the new e-procurement system, and I'm excited to learn more about this later this morning. We also, in the revised GPA, have provided more flexibility for the parties generally, and especially when e-procurement tools are used. So this is, again, all kind of working in synergy, and all these factors are working together. And finally, I would say a very significant thing in the revised GPA is the much more explicit recognition of the agreement's importance for good governance and the fight against corruption. And this is something that previously in the old GPA, and quite frankly in the WTO generally, was kind of in the background. Everyone knew it was important, but it wasn't talked about explicitly. And now in the revised GPA text, you know, this is a very explicit provision, not only in the preamble to the agreement, but also in the substantive provisions of the agreement. All parties have committed themselves to conduct procurement in ways that help to prevent corruption, avoid conflicts of interest, and so forth. And this is actually a breakthrough not only in the area of procurement, but it's a breakthrough in the World Trade Organization generally, because the GPA is actually the only one of our WTO agreements that refers specifically to the importance of prevention of corruption in international trade generally. Okay? I have just two more slides, I believe. These are on policy considerations for transition economies, such as Ukraine. These are my own personal thoughts as to some things that you should bear in mind going forward with the implementation of this agreement. And, you know, point number one is really that positive results will require sustained commitment. This is not something where, it's not like a real estate deal where one negotiates it and then as the negotiation is finished and you get to move into, you know, a new apartment building or something like this. It is really is an ongoing project. I've said it's an ongoing, the agreement itself is an ongoing project for the membership collectively, and also the implementation of the agreement is tremendously important. And this is why I'm like really excited and encouraged to hear, you know, this morning and otherwise about the measures that are being put in place to coordinate Ukraine's implementation of this agreement. And to, as I understand it, if I'm understanding correctly, to create a specific office that will be responsible for bringing commercial opportunities to the attention of suppliers, for coordinating the ongoing implementation of the agreement. I think this is a very, very useful thing to do because really, and this point I think also was made, and I emphatically agree with it, we do in the World Trade Organization, you know, that ongoing efforts to build the competitiveness of Ukraine's suppliers will be very important to enjoy the benefits of participation in this agreement. In other words, the GPA gives market access opportunities. It doesn't guarantee results. And those results, you know, benefiting from those opportunities does depend on these continuing efforts. And I would say also that, and I know you are doing this, and I salute you for this, that internally the benefits of the agreement depend on ongoing training, capacity building, efforts to professionalize the procurement workforce, also the application of complementary policies, for example, your anti-corruption policies, which are tremendously important. So there's the commitment to prevent corruption in the procurement system, and there's also
the more general aspect of anti-corruption policies. And the two, again, have to work together in synergy, and that's where the results will come. And as I've said, bear in mind, please, always the importance of your active participation as a party in the GPA and as a member of the Committee on Government Procurement. I assure Elisa, who's watching me, that this is my last slide, but I want to inform you there's something going on in Geneva in the Committee on Government Procurement, which is called the Committee's New Work Programs. And these work programs are going to be an important input to the eventual further renegotiation and review of this agreement. And these work programs are dealing very much with things like small and medium-sized enterprises, the sustainability, improving the statistics that we have available concerning the agreement, identifying and progressively, hopefully progressively in the future, reducing the exclusions that apply to the coverage under the agreement, possibly also looking with fresh eyes at things like public-private partnerships, framework agreements, and so forth. So this is ongoing work that is being done in the committee where, Ukraine has the full right, and I would say even in a way the responsibility to contribute to the deliberations in the committee. And we look forward very much to your participation in that as well. These are the things I wanted to say. This is reminding you of the big picture of the GPA, and I hope you're convinced that indeed this is a pretty important international instrument and a very significant step that Ukraine has taken, and this is why I say congratulations to Ukraine.
Robert, thank you so much for bringing for us a global framework the GPA is building at the moment for the public procurement policy. And I'm very grateful for this last slide of yours saying this is the work program, because now I have a pleasure to invite Mr. Maximilian Fyodov to tell us what's the work program for Ukraine. Please do. Thank you so much.
Hello everyone, it's my big pleasure to greet all of you in Kiev, and I'm especially happy that there are so many people from around the globe who have helped Ukraine to get to the point where it is today and continue helping us to move forward, because as Elisa mentioned, really we don't think that we've actually reached something as a final, but we actually think that this is a starting point to start to maybe reap the benefits of the hard labor and to actually feel the results and the increased competition, the increased opportunities for Ukrainian exporters, potential economies for the budget, new methods of doing business, new procedures, and so on. So there is indeed a long and I hope quite interesting and quite fruitful road ahead. But nevertheless, first of all, I'd like to touch on a few steps and important ideas from the roads that we've already passed. So GPA accession last year was indeed one of the top priorities of the Ukrainian government, and it was stated both in the program of reform of public procurement of the National Reform Council. It was part of the program of the Cabinet of Ministers and many other strategies, and I'm really happy that this was one of the areas where we were able to deliver in time. One of the questions that were often asked during negotiations in Geneva was what amount of time we need to ratify the agreement. Should it be 9 months or 12 months, or maybe we need further extension? We always said that, well, in the opposite, we wanted to be as fast as possible, and I'm really happy that Ukrainian Parliament delivered its part of the job as well, and there was basically no delay, no disturbance in I won't tell you that why we think that GPA is important for us. It is indeed the part of the bigger puzzles that we are building and reforming our public procurement system. The issue is not that we've joined the GPA because we had previous obligations that we inherited or because we were asked or forced to do. We did it because actually we think that it's really important and it's really what Ukraine needs in order to implement its strategy. Because we do believe that the key goal we want to achieve in public procurement is actually increased competition, because increased competition in tenders means less risk on anti-competitive practices, better products and services for Ukrainian consumers, lower prices, and smoothless procedures of procurement. And GPA obviously is a natural method for us to increase such competition, to bring to Ukrainian public procurement companies from abroad new types of vendors that may provide something that is not available on the local market, and vice versa, to bring new markets, new potential for Ukrainian exporters. That's why this idea falls ideally on our strategy, and that's why we implemented it into the whole picture. We also think that it's well integrated, and we're working on it with other elements of the whole reform to make it working, because I completely subscribe to Robert's words that a lot has to be done to actually ensure countries benefit from the GPA accession, and we in any way don't want it to be just a formality that Ukraine joined one of the dozens or hundreds of international treaties the country is part of, but we want it to become actually a working mechanism, and we think that Ukraine, out of all the countries of the GPA, is quite well positioned in order to actually reap these benefits. And I'll try to explain why. So you all know this picture that we always show about the so-called corruption tax and inefficiency tax that Ukrainian consumers have to pay. So 20%, it's our estimate, and I dare say it might even be a conservative estimate, judging from the results we're having in Prozoro. That's what government overpays, and that's what we want to actually put to proper use. How we want to do it? Again, I don't want to waste your time. Dima made great presentation of where it all started and all the successes and problems we faced on this way. But actually, we've done a lot during this year and a half in order to modernize the system, to build a fully electronic system that is aimed to increase efficiency, is aimed to battle corruption, and is aimed to decrease barriers of participation of businesses to public procurement. When we are talking about barriers of businesses, this obviously applies not only to Ukrainian but international companies as well. We do understand that large counterparties like Airbus or Boeing will probably have no problems participating in tenders all over the world, be it in Ukraine, Australia, or Namibia, or any other country. But we do understand that for a reasonably sized company, especially for a small and medium enterprise, participating in a tender abroad, even if it legally is able to do it, is still quite a large barrier. Realistically speaking, it will probably need a local legal consultant. It will probably need internal experts who know the language, who know the laws, and it needs some experience in order to submit the bid, in order to follow all formalities. I'm not talking that this is a chasm that can be crossed, but this is a barrier, and the more barriers you have, in the minimum, you're going to have increased price of your offer, or you probably won't submit your offer at all because you'll think that it's not worth the try. It also means that probably most international companies that participate in international public procurement tenders will tend to concentrate on the larger markets, omitting the smaller ones, just because it's more lucrative and more easy for them. And that's something that we want actually change. Just a quick reminder about ProZorro results, the recent numbers. So, and we are talking about it also because that's an opportunity for international businesses that might come to Ukraine. We have almost 6,000 Ukrainian contracting authorities that are connected in the system. This means that basically most of public procurement, and starting August the 1st, all public procurement is connected to the system, and as any potential bidder, you are able to see it in the system. You're probably, like those of you who are aware of the GPA thresholds and the practices associated with it, obviously knows that above the threshold tenders, they need translations, they need, well, in Ukrainian realities and practice, it's English version of what is being acquired, and I dare to say that Ukrainian authorities, they try to do their best to comply with the system. For example, just yesterday, Ministry of Defense, they announced their first tender in ProZorro under the new law on public procurement in defense. That's some kind of fridge equipment, and well, it is translated. I've seen it myself. So it is, again, it is an opportunity. It is a decreasing barrier of participation in the process. We really are very happy that the reform is highly praised by the world. Dmitry mentioned the World Public Procurement Awards that we won. We are quite praised by EBRD, and we are very thankful that we are included as one of the guidelines in the EBRD handbook. It's especially important for us because EBRD knows the whole history of our development, and maybe for people of the World Procurement Award, they've seen us for the first time, and maybe we are sort of like lucky newcomers for us. EBRD knows all the struggles and problems that Ukraine faced. So I mean, for us, that's really an acknowledgement of the whole process of reform, and we're very thankful for this. But then again, in the context of GPA, I want to mention it, and again, not to just to receive a compliment or to give compliment, to give credit to our team who are behind all these achievements, but actually to tell that our system and our practices are quite well reviewed, not only on the relative scale. I mean, from where we started from such deep abyss that, well, it's an achievement, but on the absolute level, which means that it's probably relatively easy for international counterparts to use the system, at least as compared to what else exists in the world. What is in the system? Actually, you see these green ticks, which mean, what is currently in the electronic process, and this means that what can be accessed by any potential international bidder without flying to Ukraine, without spending time on hotels, on translations, on notary stamps, and so on. You can see there are still few left, and I'm very happy to tell that, all of them are already in the process. They are being developed, and we do hope that by year end we'll probably have everything in green. The only issues left, and that's also where we very actively cooperate with the National Reform Council, are things that deal with actually e-assignment of contracts and fully, transferring this whole procedure into cloud-based process. It's in the parliament now. I do hope that they're going to support the two laws that deal with both the methods of encryption and the general cloud-based technology, and I think this will be it. This will probably mean that of course we'll need to test it, but I do hope this is going to mean that any foreign contractor who sits in Paris or in Madrid or in Toronto, will be able to deal with Ukrainian public procurement remotely without having actually to deal with, well, the bureaucracies that exist in any country. This BI module, again, you can see that it's in English, and we've translated it, again, not for the sake of showing to donors, not for the sake, of showing to the EU Commission and just as a showcase, but because we do understand that any prospective participant in Ukrainian tender starts not actually with finding this I don't know, this tender in a newspaper and then somehow calling us, where do we start? But they probably are starting with reviewing the market, with reviewing the prices, with seeing who the potential competitors are, what are the contracting authorities that actually are interesting for them, what are the regions that might be interesting for them from the transportation point of view, and so on and so on. So once again, this is great synergy. Electronic tool is important for us because it helps gain trust with the business, because it gives control over the process to all citizens of Ukraine, but it's also extremely important to business, both domestic and international, because it's an important free marketing tool which contains absolutely all information. I don't think that you can have such access to information in private tenders or in private purchases anywhere in the world. You probably are not able to see what are the offers of different companies to say to Vodafone and to understand if you are competitive or not, if you should participate in dealing with Vodafone in future or not. Here you're able to do this, and we hope that many participants are going to value this and use this format. Professional risk management system, again, it may be not very obvious from these many ticks and boxes and letters here, but that's actually also a tool that we are developing, and we kindly hope that the European Commission is going to support for the development of this tool in future. This is a method for us to red flag the potential problematic tenders, and by problematic I mean not only corruption, which everyone in Ukraine talks about, that we need to fight corruption, but the problems in tenders are far more what can be prosecuted criminally or what actually should be prosecuted. We see examples where the competition is low, and then we should probably work with marketing of public procurement to get more companies that are able to supply there. We are probably seeing examples where the average tender size is too low to attract interest or too high to attract interest of local players. We see examples where we see strange behavior from tender participants, which might mean some kind of anti-competitive practices which require attention of the Anti-Monopoly Commission, or we might of course see fraud both from the side of procuring agencies or from the side of bidders, which needs prosecution according to with the law enforcement system of Ukraine. This is important because it also is a method both for us to gain trust and also for us to understand the segments where the competition is low and where we'll be happy to see new faces that participate in Ukrainian tenders, again, be it local or domestic or international. We already have a new official website. Again, it has an English interface. It has great search, which we hope is at least on par with Google. Maybe it's a better answer from some point of view. Again, we are showing it not just to show that we know how to build websites, but because we want to show that we have an instrument that any international partner is able to use in order to get access to the system, in order to get information about the system, in order to get technical information about the system or API, if for some reason he wants to use it. And I can tell that we've cooperated with some members of the Open Contracting Partnership and NGOs in different countries, which are quite interesting. For example, in our business intelligence module, we've talked to great guys for that monitor tenders in Nigeria, for example. So this is an example of that falls beyond on the business cooperation, but also intellectual cooperation between nations. And I think this is also one of the big benefits of the GPA beyond only procedural achievements. We are also building the library of typical specifications, which means what is being acquired, and this is also a rule for any participant in the tender, local or international, because this means that there is a clear, non-discriminatory and quality way to actually describe what is being acquired. We do understand that in some cases, especially like at least in specific sectors like construction, it might be not that easy for international participants to actually